it would be interesting to see if that could be addressed, or if it's been addressed on a transmission line scale, other than a little local area. It would, because it may be, if that could solve the concern, mitigate the concern of many of the citizens. You're not ever going to satisfy all of them, but if that could say, well, hey, the magnetic line or fields, they're no longer a concern because we have this other measure, and therefore the only, or they're not the only, then you fall back to the next concern, which is basically the property values, and the health issues is at least for magnetic fields, is no longer an issue. That would be interesting to be able to see if there be some merit to that.
Well, we're going to look into that, and that's why we have this process. That's why every day we learn something new. So today I learned something new.
We'll see if it goes anywhere. It would be interesting just to find out. One question I'm curious about is the process. Who actually makes the decision? You're out in the field, you're talking with the public, you're getting input, but at some point there are people that are making the call. There's a board or a committee that's looking at the different options, considering all the input, and they're voting, or they're making a decision. Who are those people?
Well, I lead the project team that will make the recommendation to the administrator on both the preferred route and ultimately the route that we propose building.
You said you lead the team. Mm-hmm. How big is the team?
The team includes dozens of people, but there's probably a dozen or so that work most closely with trying to balance those issues.
Okay.
And we meet with the administrator regularly and keep him up to date on what we're doing, and we get advice from him on other things to include maybe or emphasize that we haven't. So it's an iterative process along with working with the public. It's not something that you can reduce to a formula or
sure.
a bunch of numbers.
Sure. I expect when you're dealing with people,
yeah,
there's no formula.
But we're confident that as we work through this process, that as we consider all these issues, that there will be a preferred route that will float to the surface.
Oh, there will be. I expect you have to build something.
Right.
So
well,
there will be a preferred route.
Now let's remember maybe, and that's an important part.
Mm-hmm.
So Mark's team is in the process of putting together that draft environmental impact statement. We release it towards the end of this year. We put it back out for comment. Mark's team considers all of that and the other information they're collecting. Ultimately, that document's finalized.
Sure.
Sometime in that process, a preferred alternative is identified. We then, Mark gives that information to the administrator of the agency then says, like the preferred alternative, needs still there, as strong as it was, if not stronger when we introduced this project to the public. We're going to build it. And then we issue a record of decision. And the decision is documented in that record. And we put it out and we say, here's the reason we need it, here's what I've decided, here's what we found during the process, and here's how we're going to proceed.
Okay. How significant are local representatives, their input, compared to Joe Public, a citizen out there? Do you consider the county commissioners, city council members, state legislators, does their voice carry any more weight than just a lone citizen or a group of citizens?
Well, we consider anybody who's interested in the project, and we certainly give great weight to those who are elected representing people. So we certainly have worked closely with elected officials and have staff that helps us do that. So that's really important to Bonneville Power Administration.
So you encourage local representatives
absolutely
to be very much involved in this process.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Have you seen that in our area? How are our local
Absolutely.
representatives? They are very
Absolutely.
much
Last November, the county commissioners, Clark County commissioners, actually held a public meeting that they hosted out at the Clark County Events Center. The administrator of BPA, Steve Wright, Mark, and our vice president for the organization that Mark works for, Larry Beckedahl, actually went out and answered questions from the Cowlitz County Board of Commissioners, which were guests at that particular proceeding. We had about 350 people attend that meeting. They've been very involved, very active in the project. They've provided us lots of information. And you know, at the end of the day, they represent the people of Clark County like myself. So. Of course, we're going to listen to what they have to say.
So you can have which is very good. You have a public meeting like that where you bring in a lot of the public and get all the input. But then I wonder about just simply having a commissioner or a city council member just sit down, visit you, talk with you, get conversations with you, and maybe write letters and say, okay, this is the position that I, as best I understand my constituents, this is what their voice is that I represent. This is so you do consider a lot of weight in that. So the leadership of our local representatives can be very significant.
Yes.
Absolutely. You know, Mark and myself have spent time in countless living rooms, fire stations, meeting rooms, libraries, public buildings, having conversations with private citizens, school boards, other representatives, anybody that has a stake in this project that lives in Clark County, and you know, people who live along these corridors where we're considering building this have had a very strong voice in this. But yeah, we've gotten a lot of letters from local politicians, local elected officials, appointed and elected, and it's all part of the process. It's all an important part of the process.
The decision-making meetings that you have within BPA, I expect they're not open to the public, but maybe you could help me to understand that. You get together with a number of the people that you discuss within the BPA in order to consider all this input, and you're having to do this as a committee, I assume, a board of some sort. Can anybody, are any of those open to the public where they can just come and observe and hear?
You know, it's a process that is taking several years, so we look for every possible opportunity to involve the public. And as Doug says, we go out, you know, we visit people in their homes, and we go to meetings they organize, and we organize meetings and invite them to come. So that's where we have that interaction.
Yes,
as far
I
as
understand that.
The decision-making process, that's part of our everyday job. So we do that every day, and in the end, there's a process where we document that. So that's not necessarily where the public shadows us, but that's the result. You know, that decision is based on the conversations and the meetings and the openness we've had throughout the process and gathing the information that people want to give us.
I understand. I have to ask,
So
though. The
so
question
there-
is, if the public wanted to be tuned into, not necessarily to make those meetings public input meetings, but for public, the individuals who want to be able to come in and observe and hear the scheduled meetings that you do have internally, would that be just asking for trouble, or is that something you would accommodate?
Well, you know, that would be a difficult thing as you propose, because not everybody can attend. So the fear there is that when you actually get down to making the decision, that you need to have some degree of confidence that you can speak honestly and consider everybody's issues and everybody's concerns. And that's the end point. Most of the work has already been done. Like I said, things will float to the surface, and that's where that happens. If you have some people represented, and others not, then...
You mean from the public, you mean?
Right. So
Well, I'm just thinking it's not that they have to represent anybody. It's just that if individual citizens want to come in and if the, I mean, it would be asking a lot, and maybe beyond what would be reasonable, because you have to be able to do your job. But it's not like a commitment that you're making to the public that says this is now a public meeting. But at least if individuals, representatives or whatever from the public want to be able to just be aware of when you guys have the important meetings, would they be welcome to come in and just observe?
Well, I think it's important to strike a balance between getting your work done and informing the public. And again, Mark brings up a very good point. If you were to say we're having a meeting on X from 1 to 3 o'clock in this room in our building, well, who can get there? Who has access to it? Who can come? What we do to facilitate that kind of involvement, if people want to be that involved, is we'll meet with people individually. Mark's met with numerous people who've had proposals, information to present that they wanted to give to him personally to make sure that it got included in the process. But you can't open every meeting. You no more as the CEO of US Digital have every employee access to every meeting you have than we would to meetings
Sure.
that we have to get our work done. So you have to strike that balance between offering them access to you and project officials and getting your work done.
But I had to ask.
Absolutely. No, I get it.
Because people are going to say, why didn't he ask that?
But
I wish I could be a fly on the wall.
But I will tell you this, we have probably had more Freedom of Information Act requests, and because we're a federal agency, people can ask for any information about the project that they think exists or they've heard exists. I don't think there's a document that's been produced in association with this project that someone somewhere doesn't have through a Freedom of Information Act request that we've provided them. But that's an important part of this process too. You know, we're not doing things behind closed doors that we wouldn't share with people in a very open way.
Sure. So if people want to stay informed and to be able to see the process that you're going through in order to filter down and finally end up with a smaller and smaller choice, so you end up with one final choice when you're done. If people want to follow that process, I assume that when you're having these meetings and you're trying to sort that out, that somebody's taking notes and somebody's writing out what those decision points were at that point. A public information request, would that be available for people to read those notes to see where you're at? What would they ask for?
Well, people can ask for anything they want, and we'll go through the FOIA or Freedom of Information Act process to provide that. So that's
a safe answer.
I don't try to defend myself against that or hide things.
Oh, I understand.
That process is open, and we go through that every
transparency
week.
is that goes a long way, because then
Absolutely.
the opposite end, if you try to hide that, we all know that you're not going to get buy-in from the public. They're going to feel like, hey, there's something going on there that shouldn't go on. So I get that.
Yeah.
The question is, if people want to stay tuned in and they want to know what progress has been made, what decisions, what's been filtered down so far, specifically, what would they ask for?
Well, the document that is going to provide all of that is the draft environmental impact statement.
But between now and then, you're keeping...
Between now and then, we have monthly updates, or nearly monthly updates.
About quarterly.
Quarterly updates that go out to people. We meet with anybody who wants to meet with us.
In other words, you compile
a
update that basically is supposed to be informative and bring people up to speed as to where you are and what's been likely eliminated, what's being filtered.
Okay. I assure you that everything is still on the table, that the team has not zeroed in on any route. There is no hidden agenda. We don't know what we're going to pick yet. We're in the stage where information is just flowing in.
So it's just input only.
At this point, an analysis.
November 2010 is when we...
that's a while ago.
Yeah.
That's last year.
Is when we said, okay, this is the map. We revisit it based on comments we receive in the meantime, but that's the map, that's what we're studying, that's what's going into the environmental impact statement. And as those chapters are written and pulled together and we read them this fall, that's what's going to cause us to pick one over another. And because that's meant to cover everything that people asked us to cover. All the scoping comments, somebody says, I'm concerned about recreation here, or visual impacts here, or EMF here, or timber income here. That's where all that comes together, and that's where we'll see it flow to the surface.
Great. Well, can I make a request that you can include this request in there? Would you look into the field canceling supplemental lines? Because it could make your life really easy, and it could lower costs of this thing. You could just simply stay within your right-of-way, very likely, your easement.
I would ask that not only to have you ask us that, but please, there's the comment. That's exactly where that comment should go, and that's important because I talk to people at the rallies we host, the public meetings, and they'll say to me, I want you to consider this. And I'll say, you know what? We will. Trust me, if that's a concern to you, that'll be part of what we look at. But it's got to be officially presented to us.
And we want it to be in your words.
Absolutely.
So that we don't misconstrue what it,
I don't want to mischaracterize what you've got. The other important thing is all the comments that have been submitted to us are available online. So people can look at one another's comments. They can go on the website. Again, I said we're 2 years into the process. There's a lot of information. The information on the website is voluminous. It can be hard to find, but we do have a toll-free help number for people to navigate that website.